So we're here to talk about a John Ashbery poem for John Clare. And I thought maybe we would walk through the poem and then come back to a discussion of why the title and is this a poem in reality, the structure itself, the prose poem. And one way of approaching this, I think, is to look at first, try to find the languages of limitation that are here, because there are quite a few. Limitation, or how else to put it, where we sort of come up empty, shall I say, disappointment. So in the first line, kind of empty. And then it says, well, the earth gets to its feet, salutes the sky. More of a success at it this time, not a complete success. Then there is no telling how many there are. Again, we can't know what's there completely. Further down, it never feels new, never any different. You can't take it all in. And then at the end of that first block, we feel like they have to tell us we can, but they're already gone. There is much to be said on the surface of it, but on the surface of it, very little gets said. I can keep going unless you guys want to jump in here.
No, keep going, it's great.
Yeah, there ought to be room for more things, as in there isn't presently. Further down, alas, we perceive them, if at all, as those things that were meant to be put aside. A diminution, a dissatisfaction. You can do nothing with them, not even offer to pay, which I took as humorous. And then at the end, the terrible journey towards feeling somebody should act that ends in utter confusion and hopelessness, east of the sun, west of the moon. So their comment is no comment. So there was one piece there.
But the very last line.
Well, that's what
That's the key to the whole thing.
in my view, it is. I have thoughts on what that means. So let's just talk about the last line, because I think that's the most important
Read it
one.
again, please.
Yes, all right. I'm going to just go, I'm going to read what are the last two sentences.
Good.
But the others, and they come in some way, must know too, and they in some way must know too, it would never occur to them to want to, even if they could take the first step of the terrible journey toward feeling somebody should act, that ends in utter confusion and hopelessness, east of the sun and west of the moon, so that the comment is no comment. Meanwhile, the whole history of probabilities is coming to life, starting in the upper left-hand corner like a sail. So, Lou, you said the last line for the last sentence is the whole key. What do you think is going on?
Well, this whole thing is somebody, in my opinion, somebody considering or writing to write some poetry, or considering writing poetry, or considering thinking of it seriously about anything, and it's just so confusing. There's so much. But then at the very end, it obviously he would like to start this in the upper corner again and start writing again. That's what this is. It's a blank. He wants a blank page now.
And I
to
certainly
organize all this stuff and do it.
And I certainly associate, when I hear sail,
Yeah.
I immediately think of a white sail.
Like a sail. Like
And so,
it's going to take you.
and it's an image of freedom,
Right.
of expansion. And so, before you write anything down, before you begin in the upper left-hand corner, you have complete possibility in front of you. So that was in contrast to what we just walked through. these pieces of limitation, I guess we should ask ourselves, what's being limited? And isn't he really getting at the limits of perception and of memory?
Yes,
Perception, yes.
I think so, and it's
And integration of the perception.
yeah, and
The
it's-
first part of this has no integration at all, or very little. It's sort of random thinking.
And isn't it the way our minds often operate, distractions, images, this and that, where we don't stop and look deeply?
Right.
And even if we tried, you know, it says, what will it all be like in the 5 years' time when we try to remember? Will there, and even while we're looking at it, we can't take it all in. There's so much to be said on the surface, and very little gets said.
This reminds me a little bit of Tender Buttons, especially the reference, there ought to be room for more things for a spreading out like. And of course, one of the things that Dickinson does is spread out perception, to look at things from all sorts of different angles. And
She is piercing the veil.
yes, she's piercing the veil, and then I think what he is doing here that might be slightly different, I say that very tentatively, because Dickinson, I mean, not Dickinson.
Ashbery?
No, Stein.
Well,
Gertrude Stein, is talking about mutual cohesion, which is the perception element, I think. Wouldn't it be better if we met you halfway? Where is that? Somewhere in the second
yes, no, it's,
so, but we do meet halfway because it's perception is a mediating factor. I found it, did anybody get the reference to Jenny Wren?
Yes.
What,
I get the reference to it?
yeah, do you know where that comes from, Jenny
I
Wren?
don't, I'm sorry.
no, the birds would be called Jenny Wrens.
Yeah, but
The
there's
type of bird,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, for me, there was something called the Burgess books when I was a kid,
Oh,
who personified, you know, each book took a particular creature.
Well, my wife
And
said
Jenny
Jenny
Wren
Wren
was-
does talk to us. It's beautiful language.
But that
Have
was
you ever
the-
heard Jenny Wren tell you what the beautiful day it is? She
No.
comes out
No,
and she tells you, and you gotta listen.
but instead of calling her Harriet Wren, or, you know, it's whether or not
what's the source of
Jenny
that?
Wren, yeah, was that a colloquial, or
It
was
is a
just there, or
it
was
is a colloquial
or was it
term,
invented?
but whether there is in fact a literary reference
Yeah.
associated with it, I couldn't find any.
There was a singer called Jenny Wren
Well, maybe
back in
that-
the 30s who sang cabaret type ballads.
so maybe, yeah.
Jenny somebody, and
Yeah.
her
Well,
name
that
was
would make
Jenny
sense for
Wren, but
Ashford
I don't
and his
know if that
musical
has anything to
background.
do with this.
So
But
anyway,
literally-
yeah, I mean, that's a very picky little thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
But it's beautiful, and the way he stuck it in there, I thought
yeah.
Yeah.
was cool.
You know, this idea of perception, the feeling that the sky might be in the back of someone's mind, and the mind boggles.
Right.
It can't take it all in.
Well, you know, there is a theory that there's nothing. That the only thing there is what we perceive.
Right.
And if
it's-
we weren't here, if we all disappeared suddenly, there would be nothing. There would be no universe. It would
That's
be
right.
gone.
And it's found in Buddhism and postmodern
Right.
philosophy
So I
and
thought-
other places.
But it's very man-centered, that idea.
How is that?
Because-
Explore it. I'm sure it is.
Why?
but
Well, because
explore it.
if we weren't here for us, there would be no world. But does that mean there was no world for the dinosaur?
Well, we don't know.
Oh,
that
I
mean-
see what you mean.
You know, I'm
Human
saying that, you know,
centered,
it's
yeah.
homocentric in a way
yeah.
to
It's
say
the-
that.
It's the
And the
philosophical
perception,
question, what exists?
well, also the perception of what is in the dog's eye and what is in the
That's right.
perceiving of other creatures.
Right.
And
Oh,
then
the
some
butterfly.
would say,
How
what's
does the
in
butterfly-
eye of the stone?
You know, exactly.
And I read those
Yeah.
ideas into
Yeah.
the
And I think,
first few sentences of the first
Yeah.
stanza. The feeling that the sky might be in the back of someone's mind.
mhm.
That then there's no telling how many there are.
There you go.
How many skies are
Multiple
there?
perceptions.
How many worlds are there? How many universes are there?
That's right.
It also is so interesting, the word of it. Kind of empty in the way it. So right there, it's like, what's it? You know?
Well, and we know
You don't
Ashbery
really know. The
loves
whole
to
thing is
shift.
like, yeah, is shifting.
Shifting meanings
It's all about it.
using the same pronoun.
And figure out it. Yeah.
That's one of his poetic
Sure.
techniques. And with Ashbery, so much of it is jumbled. He likes the collage effect.
This is
Mhm.
like a very poorly written student's paper, just joking.
But one who has really good sentences. So,
Well, two
'cause
things I
I've
loved
seen
about
student
this.
papers that.
Yeah,
Two
you
things
know,
I loved about this. One is
Yeah.
his thought that what is the future, and I loved it.
Oh, that
What
line.
is the future? Future is the night of time,
Yeah.
and that is so cool because we know what's in the past, we know what's here, but we don't know what's
We're always verging.
in the night. It's
And
the
then
night. And the other thing I like, because my wife is sort of an actress, and she does the yearly play for the kids, and now my mind is not, where the
Shakespeare?
Nutcracker, the
Oh, the
Nutcracker.
Nutcracker.
Oh,
She
sure.
appears in the Nutcracker, and she's an actress in the Nutcracker. But I love this. If they took an ingenious pride in being in one, alas, we perceive them, if at all, as those things which were meant to be put aside. The things that we have, but we mean to put them aside. And then it says costumes of supporting actors.
Yeah.
Well, every year, after she's done, they take her costume and they clean it and they hang it on a hanger and they put it in a closet. And if you go there, you can walk up and down the aisle and you can see costumes for all the supporting actors just sitting there. And then next year, they pull them out and they use them again, and then, but they're meant to be put aside. They're just meant for that play, and then
Yeah.
they're put aside.
Well, and
Have any of you
oh.
actually read John Clare?
Yes.
I read
Mhm.
one.
Okay,
yeah.
so you have a sense of who.
I visited him when he was at the asylum.
I think that would
that
be
addresses some
historically
very
difficult.
interesting time travel issues.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, he was so unknown, so outside in his era.
But I
It's
think
rather amazing that his poetry was saved,
and
and I sort of forget that part of the story.
in the second stanza, the second sentence, being immersed in the details of rock and field and slope.
And that's
That
Clare.
would be a reference to John Clare
Sure.
because that was the focus of his
Yeah.
poetry. That's how I
It lived
read
for
that.
him. I mean, he could feel. It was like he could feel the living leaf, the living. All of it was.
So, and I, why would this be for John Clare, other than Ashbery says, I really like John Clare. I can't think of two more different poets than John Clare with his, detail, and Ashbery with abstraction.
But they're both addressing the world, and they're addressing. He's not talking about billboards and this and that. He's really talking about addressing nature in so many ways,
I
and
think
seasons.
Mhm.
He's doing it in a very contemporary sense, but
Isn't it very similar to Larry Rivers and 19th century renditions and Frank O'Hara commentary?
I think it's even more basic than 19th century.
I think it's more basic in
I
the
mean, I
sense
think
of
it was a
where
world in
Clare
which
starts
nature-
out.
Yeah,
It's where Clare starts out that makes it very different.
yeah, and
The
I-
reinterpretation.
in a world where, I mean, when we're in an urban context, or even a modern mechanized farm context, the relationship with the world, with the sounds of the world even, are entirely different.
Mhm.
It's much more of a living creature to creature kind of thing. So it's really interesting it's actually really interesting that Ashbery does address John Clare.
this book was in or reference a book, the painting by Giorgio de Chirico,
Yeah, that was hard.
and this image that was there, and you have two people-like images staring in a window. which may or may not relate to in the first sentence, as long as that couple is stopping to look in that window over there, we cannot go.
I can't pronounce that.
Yeah, well, we just say
Was
that.
he a surrealist painter?
Precursor. He was,
Precursor to surrealism.
he was kind of doing his own thing, but it certainly looks like surrealistic.
Because some
Yeah.
of this tips my feelings of surrealism.
De
when I
Chirico
read
had
it.
a fall off in his celebrity. He ended up forging, he would create forgeries of his previous work, because there was a time when he was absolutely numero uno, and then nobody cared about him. So if the only thing that would sell would be his work in this particular time span, and he's still one of the most forged painters, practically, in
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That is so perfect for the issue of that you raised about Larry Rivers or who raised it?
I did.
Yeah.
Well, this painting, to be more exact, this painting was entitled "The Double Dream of Spring," and it's in that volume of poetry. So Ashbery named the book after this painting, the book in which For John Clare appears.
Oh.
So that's why I'm making the reference
Well,
here
I'd
to
like to
this.
see the titles of
I
all
saw
the
that
other things in
picture. I
that
did
book.
look at that picture.
And I'm not sure where that gets us,
Right.
but I think it's
I
something.
find that a very difficult picture to parse.
It's very stark,
you know,
very
I mean,
bleak.
it's gorgeous. I don't find it difficult visually, but
It's sort
but
of
to
a
start to-
haunting symmetry of
Yeah.
starkness.
which De Chirico's work and his forge
It
work.
always
you know.
is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Well,
his
it's
shadows.
almost like a
you know.
church glass window to me as I look at it here.
I mean, I like
Almost
his
like a stained
work.
glass window.
Yeah,
I like it too.
You know,
I mean,
but that's an
sort of
interesting bit.
mysterious, so.
Yes, it has those empty streets often, maybe with one shadow-like figure, but very sharp shadows against. So
and what you see
it has
here,
a sort of linearity to it. At the same time, it's
And is the square part of the Talmud or something?
that's this, which looks like maybe a painting on an easel. If you look at it, it's sort of a black and white photo of the environment around it. The lines from the outside
Oh,
of
the
the painting
thing
continue
in the
right
middle?
through.
it's like a doubling of Ce n'est pas une pomme. You know,
So
this is not an apple.
As if you were looking through a window, but the window is pretty empty of detail.
And it's surrounded by,
Yeah. So that's.
It is a kind of surreal grouping, you know.
Yeah.
If I may quickly.
What are his dates?
Please.
Oh, no, just this is
Anybody? Yeah.
probably totally irrelevant. But while we're talking about De Chirico, I did a Don Giovanni a number of years ago, and all of the scenery, it was a series of De Chirico paintings, except brought to life, and it was a great set. For
That is,
Giovanni.
yes, he would be a
Yeah.
really fine
Oh
set.
yeah. I mean, it was neat.
What are his dates?
1920s.
Yeah,
when
20s,
these were being
30s.
Yeah.
painted. This particular painting was in
That's-
that era,
It's 20s, because 20s were surreal.
or maybe it was
Surrealism.
before that.
Dali's
Art
magic
history-
stuff.
Art history is not my field, but
Once it was mine, but it's been a while. So
yeah.
Are we going to decide what we're going to do next time?
Yeah. So shall we just wrap this up? Prose poem. I would argue it's still a poem because it's doesn't have a narrative quality to it. It's filled with poetic technique, alliteration, use of imagery. Ashbery said he wanted to do prose poems in his own fashion. He tried to strip these of literary ease. He said somewhere along the way. I think he just wanted to explore the freedom that could be had by adopting this form.
Well, I also think he's a tease, really. I mean, he makes everything so difficult because he can make it difficult, and he becomes the most famous poet in America. God knows how that exactly happened. I mean, you know, he was a very charismatic person, John Ashbery, and when it was interesting to see how the world reacted when he died. The number of obits from the New York Times,
Oh,
from
yeah, no,
the
it's,
New York Review of Books, and everybody was, you know, just all over the place with incredible praise. But, you know, Scott has that book. Do you have it right here, Scott?
What's-
He's lent it to me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's got-
It's nervy.
you know, we haven't really addressed, but the whole ludic element is really important for creativity of any sort, I think, is a sense of play. It's, you know, when you lose that, it's hard to create, I think, in some way. That, you know, there's a really serious side to, you know, doing the arts, but there has to be a play element, and I think that's part of the joy
Yeah,
that
he's
Asbury
very playful.
can bring to it.
But also
play with
he
language.
is so difficult. Why is
Yeah.
it that he never gives you much to really grab onto? I mean, he has a tease. I mean,
And maybe we'd like puzzles.
yeah, that's what it is. It's a puzzle. And he's so damn smart. You know, he's really a smart guy.
I think
And he lived at an iconic moment. With a
Yes.
certain, I mean, we say that it was Gay World, and you can tell me more about that. But I think that world downtown was different from the Upper East Side.
Oh yeah, it
Different
was
from, I
very
mean,
difficult.
there really were many worlds, which really should be no surprise.
But he was a
Yeah.
central
He was a
focus
yeah.
for the New York poet.
Although when O'Hara died,
Yeah.
things kind of fragmented. So O'Hara was also a kind of glue, I guess, but of course the anecdotes from the moment would be interesting.
Yeah.
let's wrap up discussion here.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on the poem? Otherwise, I think we will call it a
It was
day.
fun,
We've
and
just
Ashbury,
scratched
we
the
could
surface
spend
on this
much more
poem.
time
And
with
let's say
Ashbury.
thanks to Al Philroyce and
For all that he does.
to
Max.
Max.
Thanks
for
to Max.
getting us
Yes.
started
Yes, very much so.
and
Good
for
job.
hanging in with us
Yeah,
and for
driving all the way from Chicago to
sta-
here
and
in
staying-
winter in the storm.
staying all the way. He's just signed up for another year as a TA.
Yes.
And for Matt Mandana, who put on this whole special exercise of reading John Ashbery and trying to get people involved in him because so many people sort of avoid him.
Yeah, this poem was under discussion just a few weeks ago in the discussion forums in the Slowpo section. That's how I spotted it, and there's just something about it that I just couldn't let go of. So.
This particular poem?
Well,
So you might, the comments are very interesting. People have different interpretations,
Sure.
but I think it just makes it more enriching to look at that.
I think the use of the natural world too, in this playful, I'll say fragmented, but it's not really fragmented, but is also a draw.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
also you find him, suddenly you're reading a poem by him in the New Yorker, and he's almost 100 years old, that guy at that point. And, you know, we went to, Scott and I went to a memorial service for this woman who's sort of the kingpin of the New York school. Do you remember her name?
Artist, I can remember.
She's an artist.
Anne Waldman? No,
no.
an artist.
Yeah,
a
An
visual
artist, yeah. She shows it.
I can't think of the people that were with O'Hara.